v'cheres hadriani. So we'll say Hadrianic cheres, Hadrianic earthenware. So remember again, this was one of the items mentioned in the Mishnah that a Jew, Rashi says over here, Elu dvarim shel, Mishnah says, Elu dvarim shel deikocham asurim v'yisron isran. No, these are the things from an ovid kocham that you cannot use, and there's a prohibition of hana. You can not only can you not use them, you can't get benefits from them. And one of these items was this cheres Hadriani. Or Hadriani, that is Hadrianic earthenware. So my Hadriani. So we'll say, what does this mean, Hadrianic earthenware? This is actually quite interesting. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Cheres shel Hadrianus Caesar. This literally refers to the earthenware of the Emperor Hadrian, right? The Caesar Hadrian. So we'll say, so remember again, we know Hadrian from an infamous perspective, because remember again, it was under the Caesar Hadrian that Hadrianic persecution began in the aftermath of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, and again, most notably, that was the era of the Asara Haruge Malchus. That was the era of the 10 martyrs, as well as an incredible number of edicts regarding religious persecution. So, what does this mean, Hadrianic earthenware? Amar Rabbi Shmuel. So the Gemara says, Cheres shel Hadrianus. Kiyasir of Dini Amar. So, what does this mean, Hadrianic earthenware? Amar, listen to this. Karka besula haisa. Shalo Avoda Adam Me'olam. So what happens? So the Hadrian devised this particular method for winemaking, and you'll see why this was important. He would take virgin soil that was never worked before. So the idea being that soil was filled with incredible vitality. What did he do? V'nata, he would go ahead and plant vines. V'rami lechamra begulfi chiyuri. And he would go ahead and he would go ahead and plant vines. He would make from it wine. He would go ahead and put that wine in brand new earthenware vessels. Gulfil chiyuri. Chiyuri literally means white, but in this context it means brand new earthenware vessels. Umaitzi lehu lechamrayu. And what would happen? And ultimately, again, he would go ahead and keep the wine in there for a while. Umitberu lehu bechaspi. And afterwards, they would remove the wine from the earthenware vessels. And we'll say, what happened? The earthenware vessels had gone ahead and absorbed the flavor of the wine. So there's a number of combinations over here. Number one, this idea that the wine itself was very strong because it was made in virgin soil, or it came from virgin soil. Number two, this was brand new earthenware vessel. Brand new earthenware vessels, that's what they're both saying. No priors, right? No prior absorptions in the earthenware. Therefore, by definition, the only thing that's absorbed in the earthenware itself is this wine. So there was a very heavy and intense absorption. So what would happen? After they emptied out the wine from the earthenware, they would break the earthenware vessel into shards. Vidaru bahadayu. And the Greek soldier, or the Roman soldiers, would take these shards with them wherever they went. And this is amazing. Wherever they went, they would travel, they would take one of these shards with them, and whenever they wanted wine, what would they do? They would fill the container with water, put the shard into the water, and the absorptions from the shard would create for them wine. Amr Rabbi Shmuel Levi, V'rishon shalanu kishlishi shalahen. And it was amazingly enough, Rabbi Shmuel Levi says, their wine was so strong that a third use of that shard was the equivalent, ultimately again, to first tier of our wine. So we'll say, see here what this means? Meaning the third time of using that shard to reconstitute wine, that wine that came from the third usage was as strong and as good as our first tier wine. Okay, so we'll say, so the idea being what? This is the Hadrianic earthenware. So the Hadrianic earthenware was earthenware that had a very strong wine infusion, and therefore, again, you can't use it and you can't get hana from it because it in of itself has the status of yayin nesech, has the status ultimately of idolatrous wine. So the Gemara says the following: the Gemara now asks also a side question. Fascinating question. Can I use, let's say, a piece of this Hadrianic earthenware? Can I use it to prop up the leg of my bed? So what's the shaila over here? So the Gemara says, we'll say we've gotten through, we've already established that I can't go ahead and drink and get benefit from yayin nesech. We've also established that I also can't get benefit from this Hadrianic earthenware. And we'll say, so can I go ahead and get benefits from it, but in a non-consumption fashion? So here's an example of, I have a piece of this Hadrianic earthenware. I don't want to drink it. I'm not using it to reconstitute wine. I'm not even using it as a receptacle for a liquid. I'm using it to prop up the leg of my bed. Is this permitted or not? So we'll say this is what Chazal term as Rotze b'kiyumo ayidei davar acher. I want to use it through some other means. Non-consumption means, but a usage means. Is this mutter or is this such? Look at Rashi for just a moment. Ayidei davar acher. It's in the shorter lines of Rashi, about 5 lines in. Yisrael rotze b'kimo sheyayin nesech. So the Yisrael, on one hand, will say, I want the existence of the yayin nesech. Right? Why do I want the existence? Because the yayin nesech is in the shard. I need the shard. However, again, v'lo b'shvilo, not because I want the wine, ela b'shvil hacheres u'l'smicha. I want the earthenware. But I will say, you see, in essence, I want the earthenware, but what's absorbed in the earthenware? The wine. So in essence, I want the wine. But I don't want the wine because I want the wine. I just want the wine because I need the earthenware. So the shaila is this permitted? Is this type of usage permitted or not? So Tashma, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yochanan, Achad Aser v'Chad Shari. So I'll say it's Machlokes. Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan, one said it was Aser, one said it was Mutter. So in the parentheses, he says over here, V'Hilchasa, the V'Hilchasa. So the Rush, the Agos says the Rush takes this out. But Hilchasa Kiman da Aser Meisvei, Sumare is the Kasha. Listen to this. Hadardurin v'harukuvos. So we'll say dardurin are leather jars, rikuvos are bottles. Shalov de kochavim that belong to an akum. Yain shal yisrael kanospan. If a Jew keeps his wine in either of these types of receptacles, either in the leather jars or in the bottles. So what's talacha? Asr b'shtia muter bahana. So you can't drink it. You can't drink. So meaning, if a Jew keeps his wine in one of these receptacles, so ultimately the wine itself is prohibited from consumption, but it's muter bahana. You're permitted to go in and get benefit from it. Hayed Shimon ben Guda l'fnei beno Rabbi Gamliel. So we'll say Shimon ben Guda gave testimony in front of the son of Rabbi Gamliel, and the testimony was al Rabbi Gamliel, about Rabbi Gamliel, sheshasa mimenu ba'ako, that Rabbi Gamliel actually had wine in one of these type of receptacles, either the dardurin or the rikuvos. He kept his wine in one of these items, and what? And he drank the wine. This happened in Akko, and he drank the wine. Velo hodulo, and I will say they did not agree to Shimon ben Guda's testimony. Now I will say what this sounds like is that they were disputing that Rabbi Gamliel did this. That's what it sounds like, although we'll examine that in just a little bit. So fine, we'll say that's the first part of the Braisa. So what it seems, okay, nudos shal avdei. We'll say nudos are leather flasks. So remember again, as opposed to dardurim, which are leather jars, this is a leather flask. So nudos shal avdei kochavim. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel mishum Rabbi Yoshua ben Kifusai aser. Excuse me. Let's say that again. Nudos shal avdei kochavim. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel mishum Rabbi Yoshua ben Kifusai aser la'asos mehen shtichin l'chamar. So let's listen to this. This is actually quite interesting. And this is more relevant to our question at hand. So we'll say, let's say I have a leather flask of an akum. So to keep my wine, and that we've already established is aser. What about taking that leather flask and making it into a saddle for my donkey? So we'll say, so this is our shaila. Rotze b'kiyumo ayidei davar acher. I understand that the item is prohibited for use in a particular way. What about if I want to use it in a different kind of way? What's the status? Here, the leather flask of an akum. I know that I can't keep my wine in there, I will say because of the yain nesech absorptions, but can I go ahead and make it into a saddle for my donkey? So what's this? So that's the shaila. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara quotes Rav Shimon Gamliel of Yoshua ben Kufsai, who says that it is aser. I will say first wide line. Vikatani daser. So this is our case. This is a case of where I take an item that is normally prohibited because of yain nesech. I can't store my wine in there. But I don't want to use it for my wine. Instead, I want to use it for something else. And we see that what? That it's aser. That it's aser. So we'll say that would seem to go ahead and answer the question that what? That if I take one of these Hadrianic earthenware shards, I cannot use it to prop up the corner of my bed because, again, that's still considered to be illegal usage of a prohibited item. So the Gemara says, Ulatamech. But using this same logic, kankanim shel ovdei kochavim lisseru lemizban. I will say, watch this. If you're going to tell me that I can't take the nodos, I can't take the leather flasks of an ovdei kochavim, and I can't make it into a saddle, which tells me that what? Rotze b'kiyumo ayidei davar acher is going to be aser. Say the following shala. Based on that, I shouldn't be able to purchase kankanim. I shouldn't be able to purchase the jugs of Oved Kochavim. And we'll say, now what did people used to do? We know, can I purchase the jug of an Oved Kochavim to use it for my wine? So that we've already established that the answer to that is no. What people used to do, Rabbi say, what Jews used to do was as follows. I would purchase these kankanim, for what purposes, Rabbi say? For a planter. A planter, I'm not going to use it to store my wine, but again, I get a good deal. You can't pass up a good deal. I get a good deal on the jug of the Oved Kochavim. I'm not going to use it for any of my liquids, but I'll use it as a planter. I'll use it as a fruit bowl. I'll use it for whatever, just not for wine, not for liquid. We know that this was done. I will say, using this logic, lissiru, right? Lissiru lemizban. We'll say, using this logic, then what? It should be usr. Why? Because we'll say, it would appear that we hold Rotze b'kiyumo ayidei davar acher, that if somebody ultimately, again, wants to use a prohibited object, but not in a prohibited way, in a permitted way, the use of the object should still be permitted. I will say, what's the raya to that? The raya to that would seem to be that I can't take the node and make it into the saddle. I can't take the leather flask. Ultimately, again, of the akko, make it into a saddle. To which the Gemara says, if that's the case, I shouldn't be able to purchase the jugs either, use them even as a planter. Maishna nodos or maishna kankanim. I will say, why is it that Rabbi Shmuel ben Kufsai said, I can't take the leather flask and make it into a saddle, yet it seems to be that I can buy the bottle of an Oved Kochavim and use it for something else as long as I'm not storing wine in there. To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Amarava gzera shema yibaka nudo. V'itlenu v'yitperenu agabe nodo. We'll say, this is something very interesting. What's the concern? Let's say I buy the node, I buy the leather flask from the Oved Kochavim, and I make it into a saddle. Fine, Shalom al Yisrael. Then I will say, what happens? I get a hole in my node, in my wine flask. We'll say, what could I do? I could cut a piece from the saddle, and I'll ultimately patch my node. That's the concern. And then again, ultimately, that's going to be significantly problematic. So because even though once I make the node of the akum into a saddle, it is still, essentially, it can still be used for node replacement parts. That's what I'm concerned about. And the pashtos leather flasks sprung a leak here and there. I could patch it from my saddle. That's where it's going to be problematic. That's why Rabbi Shmuel ben Kufsai said, you can't go ahead and purchase the node of the Oved Kochavim, even if you're going to make it into a saddle. Ulaman da'amar, rotze b'kiyumo ayidei davar acher aser. So we'll say, but one second. Going back to the opinion who said that by the Hadrianic shards, by the Hadrianic earthenware shards, you cannot go ahead and use it to prop up the leg of the bed. Because rotze b'kiyumo ayidei davar acher, if you want the existence of the prohibited item, even though you're using it in a non-conventional way that is still aser, maishna kankanim desharu. Why is it, Rabbi say, that Tana allows me to buy the bottles of the Oved Kochavim, and as long as I'm not using it to store liquids, I'm using it as a planter, then why does he say it's okay? Well, say, listen to this, and here's really where it gets to the crux of the issue. Amar lecha hasam leisi liisura be'inei hacha isa liisure be'inei. Well, say, literally translated over there, the isser is not be'en, right? The isser is not, what's the right word? I'm sorry. Extend. Oh, very nice, right? The Isser is not extending. The Isser, right? The Isser is not extending. The Isser itself is not in existence. We'll use same thing, right? Not in existence. Masha'in came by the Hadrianic earthenware. The Isser is in existence. So we'll say, what does that mean? What it means is as follows: in a regular utensil of an akum, so there's a prohibited absorption. There's an absorption. So what do we say? What's the halacha? The halacha essentially says, listen. As long as you're using the object in a way where that absorption can't come out, it's fine. So you want to purchase an old wine bottle from an akum and you're going to use it as a vase? Fine, no problem. Why? Because b'pashtus, you're using it in a dissimilar way, and we're not talking about an isser that is mamish in existence. We're talking about an isser that ultimately is absorbed. Let's say when it comes to Hadrianic earthenware, the absorption is so strong. That it's considered to be as if it's be'en. It's considered to be as if it's mamish in existence, a tangible isser. And therefore, again, the halachos are more strict concerning this particular item, which Rabbi say makes sense because remember again, what do they say? We see from this Gemara that how are they using this earthenware shard? Rabbi say they were making multiple batches of wine from this one shard, which tells you ultimately again the strength of the absorption itself. Because under normal circumstances, we assume that if an item has an absorption, very often those absorptions are extracted one or two times in. When they're using it multiple times over, that means that the blia, the absorption itself is exceptionally strong. So because of that, Rabbi saying, when it comes to the Hadrianic shard, we treat it as if what? You are dealing with mamish, real yayin nesech, be'en, right? Yayin nesech that's in existence. Because of that, the halachos are more strict, and therefore again, we paskin that even to use that shard for some other purpose, like propping up the leg of your bed, will be aser. But that is a unique halacha. Be aser only by the Hadrianic shard, but by other utensils which absorb yayin nesech or stam yainam, I should say. Ultimately, as long as you're using it in a non-normative way, it will be permitted. V'lo hodulo. So let's remember again. The Mishnah read. I'm sorry. This is from the Brisa. This is when Reb Shimon ben Guda went ahead and gave the testimony. What does the lashon here? Heid Shimon ben Guda lefnei ben Osh Rabbi Gamliel. So Shimon ben Guda gave testimony to the son of Rabbi Gamliel that Rabbi Gamliel went ahead and drank from these dardurin or rukuvos, from either these leather jars or from these bottles that belonged to an akum, but that had Jewish wine in it. So Shimon ben Guda gave testimony that Rabbi Gamliel went ahead and drank from these items. V'lo hodulo. So the Gemara says, Ramini, we'll ask a kasha. Yain haba berikuvo sha'ov de kochavim. We'll say if ultimately again you have wine, that Jewish wine, kosher wine, that comes in the bottles of an akum, asr b'shtiya muter ba'ana. So you are prohibited to drink it, but you're permitted to get hana. Hey, Shimon ben Guda lefnei ben Shal Rabbi Gamliel. But yet Shimon ben Guda went ahead and gave testimony in front of the son of Rabbi Gamliel. Al Rabbi Gamliel sheshasa mimenu. That Rabbi Gamliel actually drank wine from these utensils. Ba'ako v'hodulo. And I will say again and again, they accepted the testimony. So the Gemara says, 1 second, my lo hodulo. So we'll say, so which one is it? We have two contradictory brises. Did they accept the testimony of Shimon ben Guda, or did they not accept the testimony of Shimon ben Guda? To which the Gemara says, my lo hodulo dekamar hasam kol siaito aval beno modile. We'll say, what does it mean lo hodulo? Hodulo means it was a whole group of people who heard this testimony of Shimon ben Guda. So we'll say lo hodulo means the collective group of Rabbanim who were there did not believe the story. The son of Rabbi Gamliel did believe the story. By saying the other possibility is Guda l'chud, the Guda l'chud. We'll say, if you notice again, there's two different spellings in the two brisos. In the first brisa, ultimately again, it's Shimon ben Guda with an aleph. In the second brisa, it's Shimon ben Guda with an ayin. It could be, I will say, that's what? They didn't believe Shimon ben Guda, the aleph, but they did believe Shimon ben Guda, the ayin. Which I will say, it's just a metzias, that maybe again, one individual was more reliable than the other. Okay. Va'oros livuvin. So we'll say, remember again, next item in Mishnah, quite fascinating, is oros livuvin. We'll say oros livuvin means that if you find an animal that ultimately again appears, has a hole by the heart, we'll discuss the nature of the hole. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? So the Gemara says over here, oros livuvin. So if you go ahead and you find a hole by the heart, we're concerned that the heart was ripped out of the animal while it was still alive, which in and of itself is a form of idolatry. It's a form of idolatry, and therefore again, the animal will be aser alt takroves avodos kochavim. So says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanon, ezu or lavov. So most like, how exactly can you tell if this is an animal used for avodah zara? Meaning, what's the nature of the tear? Ezu or lavov. Kol shekura kineged alev. Number one, I will say, the tear or the hole has to be opposite the heart. That's number one. V'kadar kamin aruba. And I will say, ultimately, again, it's circular like a window. So it has, meaning, as we'll see, as opposed to a slit, it's circular in nature like a window. Yesh alav koret dam asar. If there is, we'll say, literally like dried blood, then that shows us, the reason that's asar, we'll say, is because if it's dried blood, that indicates to us that this was taken out of the animal while the animal was still alive. So we'll say, we've seen the criteria. Now, criteria number one has to be opposite the heart. Number two, it has to be circular like a window. Number three, there has to be some dried blood on it. Amadezer will say. Ein alav koret dam. Let's say if there is no dried blood there, mutter. Then ultimately, again, it's mutter. So we'll say, look at Rashi, Tar Rashi just a moment. En alav koret dam, achar have sheito iravo. So we'll say, we assume that if there's no dried blood there, that tear must have taken place after the animal has already been skinned. Kach v'lo la'avodas k'chaven. I will say, therefore, again, we attribute it to be just stam a tear. Fine. Am Ravuna. When is that so? Lo shanu elo shalom molchu. I will say that's only true if the hide has not been salted. Aval molchu aser. But if the hide was salted, it's aser. Why? Ema molchu avar aser. Because we'll say it's possible that what? There was dried blood there. But what? But what? The salting removed the dried blood. Fine. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Bizman Shakera Shelo Agul Aser Mashach Mutter. So we'll say. So listen to this. So the Gemara says as follows. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says when the tear is circular, it is aser. But if it is like a straight line, mashach also means a straight line, like a slit, then ultimately again it will be mutter. So it says the Gemara as follows. I'm Rabbi Yosef, I'm Rabbi Yehuda, I'm Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So also Rabbi Yosef says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, that the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Namely, again, that it's only called the oros livuvin ifatabosai if there is a circular hole and not a slit. Amrli Abaye. So this is actually fascinating. Abaye says halacha mechlal depligi. Now, I will say in general, whenever the Gemara has to make a statement that the halacha follows X, that usually means that what? That someone is arguing on this statement, and therefore the Gemara feels the need to make a declarative statement that the halacha follows a particular opinion. Because remember, if nobody's arguing, then what? There's only one opinion. So says the Gemara, says Shmuel, he says Abaye, Shmuel, the fact that you felt the need to say that halacha follows Abaye, follows Shimon Gamliel, indicates to me that somebody argues. Who's arguing? So this is a fascinating discussion. Shmuel says, Amalei, my nafkamina lechamina. So Shmuel says, what do you care? We'll say, what does it mean, what do you care? Look at Rashi. My nafka lechamina, bein chalukin, bein lo chalukin, halacha kimoso. What does it matter who argues? I just told you that the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Meaning, what matters, says Shmuel. Shmuel says, what matters, Abosai? The bottom line. What matters is who does the halacha follow? The halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. That the only time that it's prohibited is if there's a circular hole. What does it matter who argues? To which Abaye responds, Amrlei, Gemara Gamor, Zemurta Tehei. I came to learn Gemara. What do we do in Zmiras over here? So what does that mean? So Abaye was doing something in a very profound way. Abaye says that at the end of, look at Rashi, Amrlei Gemara Gamor. I came to learn Gemara. Zemurta Tehei, should it become Zmiras? B'tmiya, Abaye Tamido Sharav Yosef. The kamarle atam alamdenu lomar halacha kimoso utei kizemer ba'alma di ein chokin halacha lamali. Also, what Abaye was saying was as follows: in order to have the sugya klar, right? In order to have the sugya down clearly, you have to know the progression of the sugya, and the progression of the sugya requires knowing the various opinions, understanding the various opinions, and then getting into who the halacha follows. But ultimately, again, just to skip to the bottom line, so kind of undermines the Misora part of the process. So we'll say, Abaye saying is Shmuel saying, it's almost like a fundamental like machlokis, and ultimately, again, an approach to learning. Shmuel says the most important thing is the bottom line. What is the halacha? I told you halacha from Shimon Gamliel. Abaye says, yes, of course the halacha is important, but also understanding the progression and the opinions is important as well. Okay, so we'll say weiter. So next statement of the Mishnah was that if you see an akum walking in to his idolatrous house of worship with a piece of meat, and you get him before he walks in, so the meat is not yet considered to be consecrated to Avoda Zara. So we'll say, so for example, you could buy it from him, you could use it, obviously we're not talking about consumption necessarily, but you could purchase it from him as long as you get him before he goes into his house of Avoda Zara, because before then, again, it's not considered to be Avoda Zara yet. So the Gemara says, Man Tana, who is the Tana? We'll say, Amar B'chibar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Delok Rabbi Elazar. We'll say, it's clear that the Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Elazar. The Agosium changes this, the Gun Shas changes it to Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, Dik Rabbi Elazar, Ha'amr Stam Machsheves Avodos Kochavim LaAvodos Kochavim. We'll say, this is actually amazing. So Rabbi Elazar holds, I will say that the Stam Machshava, when an Akum has in mind that he's going to give something to Avodah Zara, We'll say that das was already there when? At the time of the shechita. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Stam machshavas, Rashi says, v'chishachta avda la'avodas kachavim b'shchitaso v'ne'esra d'shchitase hi takruvasa. So we'll say Rabbi Elazar holds that once an akum is going to bring an animal to Avodah Zara, he doesn't wait to dedicate that to the Avodah Zara until when? Until he gets to the house of worship. But when does he dedicate it as Avodah Zara? Bosai, already when? From the time of the Shechita. So therefore, again, according to Bosai, if you were catching the akum walking into his house of Avodah Zara, even though he hasn't walked in there yet, you have to assume that what? That meat is already usher. That meat is already usher, and therefore, again, so Bosai, so Yurash is pointing out, our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Elazar. Because our Mishnah says, we assume that he only is makdish his, or he only consecrates his meat for Avodah Zarah when he gets into the idolatrous temple. But if you catch him before he walks in there, then lemaisa, again, this meat is not aser bano. Rabbi Elazar says no. Stam machshavas avodas kochavim is, if you see him already going in there, by the time he shechted it already, it's aser al avodas kochavim. Vayotze aser v'bnei shuk kizivchei mesim. But on the other hand, if you get him coming out, which will say what? If I see him coming out with the meat, then already it's aser, because we assume that if he's coming out of the house of Avodah Zara, then at the end of the day it's already been consecrated as Avodah Zara item. My timer, we'll say, what's the reason for that? Because we'll say essentially what this means is it's impossible that it's not an offering to Avodah Zara. In other words, if you see an akum walking out with a piece of meat from his house of worship, I will say it's impossible that is not Avodah Zara. Of course it's Avodah Zara, meaning what else is happening with meat that is coming out of the house of Avodah Zara? And I will say, now again, remember, I want to point out, it could be that he's bringing it out for his own consumption. That's fine. The same way, Lahavdu Elef Alfi Rive Havdalas, we have karbanos that are offered to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, some of which we are also permitted to eat. So the fact that he's taking it out and he might eat it himself is fine. But Lamaisa, once it's coming out of that house of Avodah Zara, then what I will say, then again, that is definitively Avodah Zara. Therefore, the Jew can't get any benefit from it. Money, whose opinion does this reflect? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. It's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Because what's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira say? Tisanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Omer, Minayin letakroves Avodah Chacham shemetame ba'ohel. We'll say, how do we know that Avodah Zara is metame ba'ohel? We'll say, it's actually amazing. How do we know that Avodah Zara is essentially metame like a mace? The same way that if you have a corpse under a roof in an ohel, in a tent, so that corpse goes ahead and spreads tumah to anything else under the same roof. How do we know that Avodah Zara does the same thing? That Avodah Zara communicates tumah via an ohel. Shne'emar vayitzmidu lebal par. Literally, again, about saying in Bamidbar when they're going ahead and unfortunately fall prey to Baal Par. I'm sorry, this is in Tehillim, but referring ultimately to the episode of Baal Par. Vayitzmidu lebal par. They became close, or they literally attached themselves to Baal Par, vayochlu zivchei mesim, and they ate of the carcasses of the dead. So both said, what do you see in this pasuk? It's comparing Avodah Zara to a mace. Ma mace matame ba'ohel, just like a mace, so both said, goes ahead and communicates tumah in an ohel. Av takroves avodas kochavim matame ba'ohel. So too again, Avodah Zara both say also communicates tumah via ohel. Both say, now what does this have to do with our conversation? Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Ma meis matame ba'ohel umina. And I will say we take this comparison one step further. Ma meis aser ba'ano kidegamina b'sanhedrin v'tama sham Miriam sham egla rufa ak takroves avodos kochavim asura ba'ano. I will say we take this comparison one step further. So remember, the pasuk in Tehillim establishes a connection between a corpse and Avodah Zara. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, just like a corpse is metame tumas ohel, so to Avodah Zara is metame tumas ohel. We will say in our sugi we take it one step further. Just as a mace is aser ba'ana, you cannot derive any benefit from a corpse. So to what Rabbi was saying, Avodah Zara will also be aser ba'ana. Therefore, again, when the akum walks out of his house of worship with the piece of meat, we assume that piece. Not we assume. It's not just an assumption. I will say. For us, it's a definitive reality that halacha l'maisa again that this was used for Avodah Zara, and therefore again there's asher b'hana. Good. Next part. Af ha'olchim l'tarfos asurin laseis v'laseis. So I'll say the next part of the Mishnah was a fascinating idea that if you catch a Gentile going on his pilgrimage right? He's going on his pilgrimage ultimately again to his Avoda Zara temple, wherever it is. So what's the halacha say? On the way to the pilgrimage, the Mishnah says you can't do business with them. What's the logic? The logic is because if you do business, he's going to give thanks to his idol when he gets to when he reaches his destination. So this really is a throwback to the first Mishnah in the Masechta. However, again, once he's coming back from the pilgrimage, you're permitted to go ahead and do business with him. Now watch this. This is really fascinating. Amr Shmuel, Ovid kochav maholech letarfus v'halicha aser. So listen to this. If an Ovid kochavim is on his way to his Avoda Zara pilgrimage, so when he's on his way, you can go ahead and you could do business with him. Right? I'm sorry, you cannot do business with him. Aser, why? Because ultimately, again, since he's on his way to his pilgrimage, when he gets there, he's going to give thanks to his idol. However, bechazara, we'll say on his way back, if you catch him on the way back from the pilgrimage, mutter. You can't do business, or we'll say, why? Listen to this. My dahava hava. We'll say, my dahava hava means pilgrimage is over, right? Religion, okay, we did that, check, right, done, right, check, I already gave thanks to Avoda Zara, now we're back to regular life. We're not concerned. Also, what this really means is as follows. He's not turning back to go back to the Avoda Zara to go ahead and give thanks again. So therefore, by definition, once the pilgrimage is done, it's done, and we're not concerned that he's going to now go back and give thanks to his Avoda Zara. Well, see, if you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says, it's in the Rashi, it doesn't have its own divrei maskal, it just has a hey gimel, hachi garsinan. Amr Shmuel, Oved Gochav Maholech L'Tarfas Balicha Asher Da'azulamo Debi Chazari Mutter Mai Dahava Hava. Okay, so he goes on. He says, Yisrael. We'll say, listen to this. What about a Jew? Yisrael Holech L'Tarfas Balicha Mutter Dilma Hadrebe V'lo Ozil. Wow. We'll say, listen to this. What about a Jew who Nebuch is on his way to a pilgrimage to Avoda Zara? What about a Jew who's on his way to Avoda Zara? So we'll say, what's the halacha? So Shmuel says, you can do business with him when he's on his way. Why, Rabosai? Why? He may turn around. He may turn around. The Jew, as much as he says that he's going on his pilgrimage to Avoda Zara, maybe he won't carry through. Maybe he'll turn around. Dilma Hadrabe, Velo Azil. Bichazara, Rabosai, watch this. On the flip side, if you caught him after the pilgrimage, Aser. You cannot do business with him. Why? Rabosai, Kevan, top of Lamed Gimel, Kevan Da'avik Ba, Mahadar Hadar Azil. Because Rabbi says, since this Jew has demonstrated an allegiance to Avoda Zara and has forsaken his religion, so we'll say such a person like this is going to have an incredible level of dveikus, and we're concerned that that he's actually going to turn around, go back, and give thanks to the idol. Rabbi say, hear this? Such is the power of a Jew. Such is the power of a Jew. See, Rabbi say, at the end of the day, before he makes the pilgrimage, there's always hope. There's always hope. Meaning, again, even though he's on his way, he packed his bag, he's on his way to Avoda Zara pilgrimage, as long as he hasn't gotten there yet, we always hold out the hope that he could turn around. So you could do business with him, because we don't automatically assume that he's going to carry through on the pilgrimage. But you know, the strength of Klal Yisrael is that we're an Amkishe Oref, we're a stiff-necked people, and we have incredible resolve. That works both ways. So the problem is that, unfortunately, once he's gone ahead and gone over to Avoda Zara, we know, at least for the little bit of time that he's there, every Jew comes back. Everybody does tshuva. It's just a question of when. We know that he's going to have a stark connection to this Avoda Zara. So once he comes back, you can't do business with him, because we're literally concerned that, unlike his Akum counterpart, if he gets a good deal, he will what? He will turn back around and go to the Avoda Zara. But one second, we have another price that says that what? That if Yisrael is going to the pilgrimage, right, whether he's going or whether he's coming back, Aser, you're not permitted to do business with him. So Ravashi, so which one is it? The first price says when he's going, you can do business. On the way back, you can't do business. Second price says whether on his way there or way back, you can't do business. It's not a contradiction. Ravashi, Kitanya hi bi Yisrael mumar devade azul. This second price was about a mumar. So both remember again, a mumar is someone who is mamish aduk ba'avodah zara. Meaning he's meshugal adavar, right? Meaning he's exceptionally corruptly pious, right? The idea is that he's mamish embedded in idolatry. So we'll say, so for this kind of person, for a mummer, inachinami, you can't do business with him on the way there, nor can you do business with him on the way back. Why? Because we're concerned on the way there or on the way back, he's going to give thanks to his Avoda Zara. A Stam Yisrael Abose is just struggling theologically. On his way there, you can't do business with him. Why? Because there's always the possibility that what? That'll turn around. On the way back, the problem is, I will say, once he's already done the Avoda Zara, we have to be concerned that if you do business with him and he gets a good deal, he will go back again. I will say, I want to be clear. That doesn't mean we're throwing in the towel on this Jew. You don't throw in the towel on any Jew. Every single Jew is holy, and every single Jew is beautiful, and every single Jew is special. And even those of us who are broken, we fix ourselves at some point in time. For some of us, it takes a long time, but we fix ourselves. But what it's saying is at this moment, when he's demonstrated his fidelity and allegiance to the Avodah Zara, so he can't do business with him on the way back out of concern that he may go ahead and say, what, turn back around and give thanks to his Avodah Zara. So we'll stop over here. I'll share with you a short idea on the parsha. So also we know that we have the great sechos this week to start the parshios concerning the Mishkan. Truma Tetzaveh and then Vayakel Pekudei deal extensively with the details of the creation of the structure of the Mishkan, the kelim of the Mishkan, the utensils, and then again the big day kahuna. So the parsha begins with a simple phrase, but yet a phrase which is so dramatic in that it is interpreted in so many different ways. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Daber al bnei Yisrael v'yikchu li truma." Speak to the Jewish people, and you will take from me a truma. So you'll take from me a truma. You'll go out and you'll take from me. We normally translate it as a gift, right, or a separation. Tell the people to separate from their wealth and ultimately give it to me for the creation and the fabrication of the Mishkan. So there's a magnificent insight by the Kotzker. The Kotzker says as follows. He says the lashon of truma we normally translate ultimately as a gift. As a gift, right? Uncle says lisparshun, as a gift. As a gift, matana, or a separation. The idea is I'm taking something from me and I'm giving it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the truth is, we know that the shoresh of truma is really the same notion of laharim, to lift up. To lift up. Truma means to lift up. So again, on a base level, it can mean my money is with me. I'm lifting it up and give it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Kotzker says something amazing, because it will say, I mentioned this in the Rabbi Nachman shir, that the great struggle with these parshios, we're amongst friends, so we could be honest. No one really looks forward to Truma Tetzaveh Vayakel Pekudei. Let's be honest. No one really looks forward to it. Like even the Cheta Egel in Kisisa is like a welcome reprieve, right? Why? Because the truth is, we see these parshios, and okay, it's Torah, so therefore I have to learn it. But these details have nothing to do with me. These details have nothing to do. Remember, again, there will never be a Mishkan again. There'll be a Bayis Shish, there'll be a third Beis HaMikdash, but never again will there be a Mishkan. So we'll say, what do I do with all of these details? That's how the Svarim explain that in every single one of these details, Rabbi said, there are life lessons for us to learn that apply contemporarily as well. So the Kotzker says something amazing. He says, V'yikchu li truma doesn't just mean separate out from me money to build a Mishkan. He says, truma is lashon harama. In life, what's the goal? The goal is to lift ourselves up. The goal is to give truma of ourselves. The goal is aliyah. The goal is to grow. The goal is to ascend. How do I do that? How do I grow? He's asking a general life question. We all want growth. Even those of us who don't yet know that we want growth. We all want growth. There's no such thing as a Jew who doesn't want to grow. There's no such thing as a neshama that doesn't want aliyah. So ultimately, again, how do we grow? So the Kotzker says something amazing. He says it comes not from the word truma, but it comes from the word vayikhu. He says, lashon kicha bechinas mekach. He says, vayikhu kicha, so lashon mekach. Mekach means what, Rabbi say? A purchase or a business transaction. Get ready for this. He says, you can learn about spiritual growth from business. How so? Bal Esek, eneno poresh mi isko, impam eneno matzliach basakov. We'll say every single businessman knows that if you want to be successful in business, there's one thing that's clear, which is what? You have to be prepared to fail. Inevitably, some deal is going to go bad. Some deal is going to go south. Something is going to fail. But what does the businessman know? He also knows that after your first failed venture, you can't close up shop. You can't close up shop because if you close up shop after the first failed venture, then what? then of course, again, you're not going to make any money. So every businessman knows you have to be prepared to fail, and in the wake of that failure, you have to begin to rebuild yourself. Yodehu, im yafsik b'masu matan, yismotet kulu, because we'll say one thing is clear, which is if after you fail, you stop building your business, one thing is clear, which is what? You will be poor. You will be poor. At the end of the day, remember, if I don't work on the business at all, of course the business will not thrive. He says something amazing. I will say what's true in the business world is true in the realm of spirituality as well. If you're not successful, even for a number of times, I will say the goal is to keep on trying. Just like in business, one bad deal, you don't close up shop. Right? You recognize that failure is par for the course. I will say it is the same that is true in spiritual growth as well. In spiritual growth, I will say failure is par for the course. And the challenge of life is sometimes we fail and we stay down. Sometimes we fail and we give up. Sometimes we fail and we simply throw in the towel in the realm of ruchnius. I'm never going to amount to anything, says the Kotzker. Just like there are things in the business world that you can learn from spirituality, there are things in this world of spirituality that you could learn from the business world as well. Just like in business, if you fail, you have to learn from your failure, pick yourself back up. So in the world of spirituality, you have to learn from your failures. Don't chas v'shalom stay down. Just pick yourself back up. So this is the Kotzker says, this is the pshat in the pasuk. Truma. All of us want an aliyah. All of us want the harama. All of us want to go ahead and lift ourselves up. So what's the key? What's the secret? The yikchuli truma. If you take an approach of mekachu memkar, if you take the business approach to spirituality, then in the wake of failure, don't close up shop. Don't shutter the window. Don't shutter the store. But go ahead and figure out what can I learn from this failure and how can I grow from this failure. The same thing I will say is true in the realm of ruchnius. In spirituality, there is no one among us who has the ability to live on a constant high. There is no one among us, I will say, who has the ability to always go ahead and be spiritually perfect. There's none of us who have the ability to be constantly and consistently plugged in. There are valleys, and there are peaks in the realm of ruchnius. I will say this, sometimes when we get into a valley, you know what happens? We stay there. We stay there. Because we tell ourselves, oh, look how far I've fallen. There's no way I can ever get myself out. I will say, we would never take that approach in our parnasa. Because if we would take that approach in our parnasa, we wouldn't be able to sustain our families. In our parnasa, we realize that even if I'm in a valley, I got to fight my way out and rise back up to the peak. If it's true in my parnasa, it's true in my ruchnius, as Rabbi say. Even in the midst of failure, and even when I find myself, Rabbi say, at a very low point, v'yikhuli truma. I have to figure out how to raise myself up back again. In the face of failure, I need to learn from the failure and figure back out how to get back to my peak. If I want the truma in life, if I want harama, if I want growth, if I want aliyah, I have to accept the mindset of mekach memkar. Apparently, to be a successful Jew, you also have to learn the art of being a successful businessman. And so when we encounter failure, I was saying, the same way, hopefully we rebuild ourselves financially, we should be Zoch HaMerzon to find the koch to rebuild ourselves spiritually as well. Amen.